No sound in nature has terrified people more. And no animal has been so intensely hated as the wolf. For thousands of years, humans have waged war against wolves until they were almost wiped off the map of Europe. In the 1970s, wolves headed the list of endangered species. But today, in an uphill battle, they are reclaiming their former European territories. This is the story of the miraculous return of the wolves and of Eric Zeeman, who has dedicated his life to an animal, a legend and a dream. For 20 years, he's been living with wolves. In the 70s, in the Abruzzi Mountains in Italy, wolves had one of their last remaining footholds in Europe. For Eric Zeeman, these tracks in the snow were the beginning of a lifetime's research. At that time, the future looked bleak for wolves in Italy. No one knew exactly how many had fallen victim to poachers, but the losses were enough to cause concern. The Abruzzi packs are small, often consisting only of a male and a female with their cubs.
Luigi, can you hear me? Over.
Eric studies the wolf's ecology in Italy, together with his colleague Luigi Buitani. They were able to fit radio collars to a few of the last wild wolves to follow their movements in detail.
Yes, Eric, I can get you.
Where are you? Over.
The cold scientific data soon built into a lively story of wolves and people in the Abruzzi Mountains.
Luigi, I've got him.
At one time, sheep and goats were the main prey of the Abruzzi wolves. The shepherds used big dogs to protect their flocks. But the wolves were still able to rob them, even in broad daylight. Not surprisingly, this enraged the shepherds. In the absence of wild prey, the wolves caused havoc in the domestic herds.
Love, come here. Come here. Sit.
Even though Eric and his team always sympathized with the wolves, they could understand the shepherd's frustration at finding another of his flock dead. Talking to shepherds and recording their stories, the scientists could develop a conservation program which got the much-needed support of the local people.
And the trend was negative, and it was obvious that we had to do something very soon. If we could not reverse the trend, the wolf would disappear from Italy. And that was the beginning of the story.
When night falls, the wolves leave the security of the mountains. Their search for food will bring them close to people. Luigi and Eric wait near the village dump. All the animals in the area come here sooner or later. The village dogs are early visitors, but Eric and Luigi are waiting for their wild relatives. The drowsy herds are a powerful temptation. but the guardian dogs drive the wolves away. So, even for the mighty predators, there remain only the easy pickings of the village dump.
And the wolf
Yeah, that would be nice.
eating, of course,
Spaghetti.
the spaghetti, what was left from the restaurant.
Yeah.
And,
Fondly nicknamed spaghetti wolves, the animals turn for sustenance to the territory of humans. The researchers often found the wolves in the quiet alleys of sleeping towns. They never discovered what attracts them. Perhaps they are merely curious. As dawn breaks, the wolves return to the mountains. They must beat a safe retreat before the people wake up. For most people, the idea of wolves living in the middle of an ancient European settlement is incredible, but in Italy, it's a fact. This may stem from the Italians' general attitudes towards wolves. To them, the wolf is a symbol of maternity and sacrifice, and it has always been admired as part of the country's cultural heritage. This tolerance of wolves is probably one of the reasons for Eric and Luigi's success in protecting them in Italy. Their work has enabled the population to grow to several hundred animals. Today, wolves can be found all over Tuscany, as well as around Florence and Siena. From Italy, they have crossed the Alps into France, which now has its own wolf pack. The changing European landscape means that increasing numbers of wolves are now able to survive. Agriculture has withdrawn from many areas, and wild animals have reclaimed their former domain. The return of the wild boar is a sign of the changing times. Suddenly the predators can find plenty of wild prey. For many European wolves, the good life has returned. This is Finnskogen, or the Finn forest on the border between Sweden and Norway. In the mid-80s, an extraordinary thing happened here, which was to be repeated in other parts of Europe. One or two lonely wolves strayed far from their traditional territories and, against all the odds, established a new pack. Some people say the wolves were always here, while others claim that they must have wandered all the way from Russia, but that's very unlikely. How could they travel thousands of miles totally undetected? On their way, they would have had to cross hundreds of roads and motorways. No one knows the truth. But the fact is that two lone wolves seeking partners found one another. Soon afterwards, the howls of young wolves were heard once more in the forests of Scandinavia. Their ability to regain a foothold there was due in large to the success of another animal. The moose is the largest deer in Europe, standing more than 6 feet tall, a valuable attribute in a country where the pastures are hidden under snow for much of the year. They can easily reach the evergreen branches of pine or the nutritious buds of deciduous trees. But living in this harsh climate where deep snow makes it difficult for them to run, moose were hunted to the brink of extinction 100 years ago. Then man, the culprit, became man, the savior. In a few decades, major changes to forestry practices produced not only a lot of new forest, but also a lot of food for the moose. Yet, as on many occasions in the past, human attempts to manipulate the environment created problems. Soon, the moose population exploded and began to damage the forest by overbrowsing. With no natural enemies to control their population growth, moose began to starve as the food ran out. The ecological balance was upset, and thousands of them died. But then the wolf returned to the forests of Sweden. Erik Zeeman came to the region of Värmland to work with Erik Isaksson, a wolf tracker, and his colleagues. They were all amazed that wolves had returned to Sweden. Even more astonishing was the fact they'd chosen to settle in the southern forests, because previously they had survived only in the mountainous expanses of Lapland to the north, where they had plenty of reindeer to prey on. But now the wolf tracks came closer and closer to densely populated areas of Sweden. The reaction was immediate. Hunters were the first. Everywhere in the world they're reluctant to share their prey with others. In the land of the wolf, even more so.
Jag tror att 95% av jägarna som är helt emot vargen.
Är det för älgens skull eller?
Ja, det tycker jag för att det är för inte vana det att de tycker det går lite grymt till vägarna som älgarna blir tagen på det viset. Och att de blir skadade och går kanske flera dagar ibland i en del djur, för det har de ju sett.
People in Värmland are very suspicious. Many of them are convinced that the authorities introduced the animals in secret.
Han har varit bort i 100 år, så kan han vara bort i 110.
Ja, men nu har den kommit.
Ja, han har kommit. På ett konstigt vis har han kommit.
Men har jag chansen att vara ensam så skjuter jag han.
Men du vet att det är olagligt.
Ja, vem ska ta mig för det?
In spite of the hostility, the wolf has made a remarkable comeback in Sweden. From the first breeding pair in the late 70s, the population now contains at least 20 wolves in several packs over a large area. Erik Zeeman has returned to Sweden many times over the past 20 years to speak to the people. Everyone has their own wolf story. A young Norwegian, Håkon, was thrilled by his experience.
Så körde vi på en skogsbilväg och så plötsligt så sprang den över vägen och så stoppade vi bilen. Så gick vi ut för att se vad det var.
1728, den 6 januari, Jon Ersson i Smedsrud, ihjälreven av en glubisk ulv, 9 år är gammal, begraven. Här har vi faktiskt för en gångs skull belägg för att en muntlig tradition om att varg skulle ha dödat barn faktiskt har ägt rum.
Håkan Ellis has pored over church records covering a 100-year period when wolves were numerous in Värmland and many shepherds and farmers lived in the forested countryside. He found no cases of wolves attacking and killing people, but the hatred lives on. In Norway today, many people still live close to nature, running small farms and often grazing a few sheep in the forest. When Erik Seaman visits people who have discovered a newly killed ewe, feelings run high.
Vad är skillnaden mot gaupe i så fall?
Gaupe tar sjelden, han kan jo ta vaksen dyr, men han tar som regel lam. Dette en vaksen sau da. Så
at det helt forferdelig at det slik skal foregå her i landet som vi har et naturvern. Og skal vi ikke ha rett til å verne dyra våre mot rovdyr?
Tør ikke å sende, eller gå alene heller i skogen, og ikke sende unga sine heller.
However, not all encounters between people and wolves are hostile, even in Europe. In Romania, as in Italy, humans and wolves are on relatively amicable terms. Here there are still plenty of wolves, probably several thousand. Finding that so many wolves roam freely in Romanian forests was a great surprise for Erik Seaman and others who took the opportunity to visit the formerly isolated country when it opened its doors to the west. This is far from a wilderness. The fate of animals in any region depends completely on local history and the people's attitude to nature. In essence, this attitude is what we call culture. The story of Romania adds a lot to our understanding of the relationship between people and wolves. Time seems to stand still in these mountains. While the fertile valleys quickly attracted Hungarians, Germans and others, the barren mountains never drew many settlers. Not even Ceausescu's commissars felt it worthwhile to try to organize the local inhabitants. People here still live as subsistence farmers, with a few cows, sheep and goats, and perhaps a horse to help with the heavy work on the steep slopes. The wolves are everywhere. It's almost like returning to the Middle Ages in Western Europe, the very period when similar conditions gave rise to our hatred of wolves. But when we spoke to people here, we were surprised to find no mention of the big bad wolf.
E frică, fuge. Nu mai de mine. N-are lipsă de ei, numai de oi, de vaci, de ligioane. Pala mic îl fur eu.
Nu sunt lupi. Iarna, dar acum vara n-am văzut. După ce ninge, pe urmă mai umblă. Mai vine, iarna vine și la oi pe aici până o gradă mai... A fost și ursul, da. Nu. Ne-am obișnuit. Da, dar la lume nu sare, numai dacă îl tăie după el sau îl super, da, așa?
In communist times, the wolf was ruthlessly hunted, but today hunters try to protect all the creatures of the forest.
Wir haben in unsere Jagdreviere viele verschiedene Tiere. Also wir jagen jetzt vielmals Sauen, Hirschen, Rehböcke, auch Bären und Gämse und Auerhahn und Luchs und Wolf. Früher in Kommunistzeit, wir müssen einen ganzen Kampf gegen die Wölfe geben. Also jetzt ist ganz anders. Jetzt jagen wir nur mit Flinten Wölfe und wir haben genügend Wölfe, nicht zu viele, nicht zu wenige und wir wollen nicht ausrotten, sondern bleiben an derselbe Nummer der Wölfe.
An eagle soars on thermals over the Cantabrian mountains of Spain. Spain is another country with a strong wolf population. Perhaps as many as 500 of them live in the mountains in the north. South of the mountain range lies a huge plain stretching towards Madrid. Eric Seaman never imagined that this modern agricultural region could be wolf territory. But one lovely evening he visited Spanish colleagues who were determined to convince him.
Mira, me parece que ahí hay uno. Sí. A la izquierda del maíz. Está andando por unas tierras que hay delante. Mira, Eric, mira. Está allí, a la izquierda del maíz. To the left of the maize. He's running to the left. Can you see them? I see the maize. Yeah, the maize. Just before the maize, there is a field, brown field, and he's running to the left. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see it, yeah. You see it also?
Sí.
Oh, fantastic.
It's a big one,
in this area.
Yeah. No one knows. For us, it's not too strange that. I know that the first time that you can see that. No one knows.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh.
Good
This
luck.
is fantastic.
Yeah.
This is the area where I never would expect the wolf. Definitely not.
Yeah, it's very nice.
To Eric Seaman, who studied wolves all over the world, this was an amazing encounter.
I know.
He decided to stay on in the area to find out more.
Mariano? Sí. I don't know. Yeah, there are two.
Eric and his wife Mona used a haystack as their hide. From this vantage point, they could watch over a huge area of pasture and cornfields on the outskirts of the village. He was deeply moved to discover that wolves could be seen in a modern farming landscape in Europe, in the middle of a lot of people. He felt renewed hope for the future of European wolves. Not far from the hide, great bustards were feeding. Now all they had to do was wait. Eric and Mona spent many long nights and days in the hide. Every morning at dawn they saw shepherds coming out into the fields. Eventually, they got to know Valentino. He often drank too much, but he had a sober view of the wolves.
A mí no me atacan los mastines porque tengo los 3 mastines. A los lobos.
El de los lobos, el más dañino que hay. Es que había que matarle.
But Valentino's colleague doesn't agree.
Que en una vez vi 3 pequeños y 4 grandes. ¿Qué hay que hacer con esos animales? Si vienen a ganar, matarles. No. Yo creo que sí, yo no. No les respeto ni aunque esté la Guardia Civil. ¡Hey! En una ocasión tuvimos que tener amontonadas las ovejas más de 3 horas. Por no echarles desviadas del ganado. Entonces, ¿qué hacemos con esos bichos? ¿Criarles o matarles? Tenemos que matarles.
Opinions may differ in Spain, but none of the locals hate wolves. This reaction is very different from that in Northern Europe, and it offers new hope for the wolf. The birth of a lamb is a common event in the fields, but newborn lambs often die. There are always those who prosper on the misfortunes of others. First come the vultures, then the dogs, and there on the edge of the field, the next scavenger waits his turn. A wolf. It's a special thrill for Eric to see a wild Spanish wolf up close. He sees that it's spotted the dogs, but he doesn't know what will happen. He lets the camera run, and suddenly the wolf charges the dogs, which it considers as its rivals.
Das sind ja 5.
Ja, ich hab sie drinnen. Mensch, das ist aufregend, das ist ja unglaublich. Die haben die Hunde gejagt.
Warte mal, Erik. Jetzt kommen sie recht zu Haus.
A drama unfolds in the everyday story of Spanish country folk. This brief episode instills hope in Eric and Mona that wolves, against all the odds, will also find room to live in a densely populated Europe. But what do we really know about this animal, and what is it that arouses such strong feelings? What is the true nature of the wolf, and how do we overcome our prejudices? To answer these questions, Eric Seaman began studying wolves in captivity in the 1960s inside a huge enclosure in Germany's Bayerischer Wald National Park. As a young scientist, Eric Seaman often used a film camera to document the wolves' behavior. Many of his sequences depict activities rarely seen in the wild. It is a unique record of the social life of wolves. There were as many as 20 wolves in the enclosure, and they soon formed 2 packs, a large one with 10 wolves and their cubs, and this little pack with only 1 male and 1 female. When the 2 packs claimed territories within the enclosure, the larger of them was clearly able to defend a much bigger area. But at times the pack of 2 were able to make their presence felt in different ways. The big pack defends its territory fiercely, and the couple usually withdrew when they knew they'd been spotted. But this time, they make a serious mistake. When the wolf makes his mark in foreign territory, he doesn't realize he's already under observation. The highest-ranking female in the big pack leads the attack. The intruder is soon cornered. follows is a life and death battle, a desperate struggle for superiority. These territorial encounters are common in the wild. Where wolves are plentiful, as in certain parts of North America, they happen so frequently that most adult wolves will die sooner or later in a territorial battle. Against fearsome odds and badly wounded, the male escapes with his life. In spite of the occasional battles, life within the large pack is mostly peaceful. The animals like to play with each other, wrestling and socializing. But the playfulness stops when it's time to eat. There's a strict hierarchy among the wolves. Bared teeth and deep growls are serious warnings to lower-ranking members to stand back and wait their turn. But in spite of all the growling, everyone gets a share of the meal. Each pack member's social status and rank are clearly defined. Higher-ranking wolves will often try to impress others with a show of strength, forcing lower-ranking animals to yield with clear signals of submission. Demonstrations of power can be very violent, and sometimes, especially during the mating season in February and March, several males will gang up on one of the others. But the aggression appears much worse than it really is, and among young males it fades as quickly as it arose. Among females, the situation is often more serious. Their aggression is not so easily forgotten. The dominant female, referred to as the alpha, repeatedly attacks another adult of her own sex. At times she'll get assistance from her own year-old daughters who are not yet sexually mature and so pose no threat to her rank. That rank cannot be questioned. Any mature female challenging her authority will be forced out of the pack. All this aggression is about one thing: the right to mate. Not even a very large pack can support more than 4 to 6 new recruits, that is, the litter of one female. It's important, therefore, that only the alpha female be allowed to mate. When she is willing and in season, her scent sends out an amorous message that no male can misunderstand. During the first phase of estrus, she will allow all the male wolves to mate with her. There is a shrewd reason for her apparent promiscuity. When the cubs are born, the young males will care for them as if they were their own, although that may well not be the case. The real father will most often be the alpha male. He mates in the middle of a reproductive cycle when the chance of conception is greatest. In the end, experience triumphs over youthful exuberance. During mating, the penis swells so that it gets stuck inside the female. The pair may then stay attached for half an hour. Occasionally, young males mate with other females in season. Such matings are an obvious threat to the alpha couple's position, as no other cubs may be born within the pack. This is another cause of conflict. Younger wolves step in and try to interrupt the unwanted mating. When the alpha female realizes what's going on, she shows no mercy. Once again, it's a matter of life and death. To the North Americans, the wolf symbolized their origins and mighty supernatural forces. In Europe, Odin, the old Germanic god, had his wolves. And in the Roman Empire, it was a she-wolf who saved Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. In the early Middle Ages, the nobility demanded ownership of all game, and in their hunting reserves there was no room for wolves. They turned on the peasants' herds and flocks instead, creating hatred of the wolf as the people blamed it for all their misfortunes. New wolf traps were designed, and a new occupation arose: wolf killer. A tragic situation arose where people were breeding dogs whose function was to kill their own ancestors. The Emperor Charlemagne demanded that all his subjects take part in the struggle, not just against Saxon heathens, but also against wolves. His armies set out in God's name to hunt and destroy. The wolf became the symbol of evil in the European psyche. Terrible deeds were blamed on werewolves and vicious punishments exacted. It seems strange to us that intelligent people should take seriously the idea of wolfmen. It's not so strange that the wolf was the Nazis' symbolic animal. Hitler himself kept German shepherds, as wolf-like as dogs get, and he was called Wolf by his closest friends. His troops were wolf packs when they invaded other countries, a fact which the Allied cartoonists were quick to ridicule. So the threatening image of wolves grew even stronger. Finally, the Germans themselves adopted the wolf as a symbol of terror when they warned of the communist invasion from the east, depicted as wolves rushing towards their borders. In Bavaria today, tales of the big bad wolf are still told, and every year the savage beast is a cause of celebration. As everybody knows, wolves are especially fond of young girls. Little Red Riding Hood, seduced by a wolf. The conflict between strength and cunning. The stories change as centuries pass, but the theme is the same. The virgin threatened by the werewolf, the monster. The origin of these images is lost in the mists of history. But fear has always been used by those who seek power. Men's dominance over rebellious women, parents over their naughty children, and the master class over those of their subjects who refuse to toe the line. Wolves have always been close to humans, so close that they were the first wild animals to be domesticated. How this happened, how wolves became dogs, has fascinated Erik Seeman for many years. Taming the wild wolf, or creating the dog, must have begun with our ancestors bringing up a pair of wild wolf cubs. In an attempt to recreate this, Erik and his wife Mona are raising wolf cubs that they take from the den of their captive pack.
Zwei Weibchen. Ein Rüde und zwei Weibchen. Da. Deine Kinder.
Was die für kleine Öhrchen haben.
They have to be careful. Their assistant Tony keeps the adults at a distance.
Du, ich kann mir gut vorstellen, dass eine Frau die an die Brust gelegt hat.
Sage ich ja.
Even though the adult wolves are tame, they react instinctively when someone tries to take their cubs.
Toni, wir sind draußen!
It may seem cruel to abduct the cubs, but if they are to be tamed, they must be taken from their mother before they are 10 days old.
Du Kleine, wie sollst du denn heißen?
During their first days in captivity, the cubs must be given milk every 3 hours. The bottle feels different from their mother's teats, but they get used to it and will happily drink milk for the next 5 or 6 weeks.
Willst du jetzt schlucken? Die ist jetzt satt.
Bist du schon satt?
Bist du auch satt?
Schon satt. Das strengt ja auch an, dieses Schnuckeln. Wir wollen das Zeug nicht. Hm?
Oh.
Die haben wirklich Hunger.
Ja, das schmeckt's. Ja.
Nimmst du den auch mit?
Na, komm mal her.
Komm mal her.
10 days later, the cubs have grown a lot. Their appetites have increased, and it's time to put a little meat on the menu.
Das ist aber zu groß, das Stück für dich, du. Aber das musst du mal in einer Woche musst du mal sehen. Dann hat mir das alles weggefressen. Alles weggefressen.
Die ist ja müde. Komm mal her. Hm? Guck mal, was hältst du denn davon? Ja. Guck dir das an. Sofort hellwach. Na, das kann doch wohl nicht wahr sein. Hm?
At this age, the cubs lose their instinctive fear of everything, including humans. This is when they form social attachments, and in the absence of the wolf pack, they become attached to people. Humans and wolves become partners. But who was the first person to raise a pair of cubs on milk? Who created our first domestic pet, the dog? It's believed that it happened near the end of the last ice age, about 15 to 20,000 years ago, probably in Central Europe. People of that era have left a great deal of evidence that theirs was a rich culture, including beautiful wall paintings depicting animals and humans. There are plenty of carved examples of buxom women. Looking at the carvings in greater detail, a complex image appears. The wolf is not alone. It is being suckled at the woman's breast. In the absence of other domesticated animals, only women could produce the milk needed to wean a wolf cub, thus creating a dog. Even today in other societies, women nurse domestic animals in this way. In many cultures, there are clear connections between young animals and women. But it was the men who put these new allies to work. They made the dog a hunting partner, and later a shepherd when there were domesticated animals to look after. In the warmer climate after the Ice Age, new species invaded the lush new landscape. Man refined his hunting methods. He began using bows and arrows, cooperating with his new friend, the dog. It may have been this hunting that wiped out many quarry species and forced humans to travel in search of prey. With canine draft animals, humans migrated from Europe to North America and became the ancestors of that continent's native tribes. But not everyone went east to the new continent. Those who remained in Europe developed agriculture and animal husbandry, and a new chapter began in the relationship between humans and wolves. To protect their new invention, domesticated animals, men bred new strains of dogs to fight off their own ancestors, the voracious wolves. The wolf, as a friend and partner, suddenly became a deadly foe. The ancient rivalry is most clearly expressed in relations between hunters and wolves. In Little Red Riding Hood, it's a hunter who rescues the little girl from the wolf. Was this a noble gesture, or did the hunter have his own plans for Little Red Riding Hood? As the story develops, the question arises, is the modern hunter's hatred of wolves based simply on the primitive desire not to share his prey with anyone? Modern wolves have plenty to think about as they observe the human race. How can they understand the joy and pride of men posing with their dead trophies? It may be that the prejudice of the few will finally decide the fate of the wolves. There is a new dawn for wolves worldwide. Their remarkable return to many areas of the world is another sign of the new relationship between people and nature. In the minds of most people, wolves no longer represent hatred and competition, but rather respect and a sense of harmony with the environment. Just 4 weeks old, the cubs peer from their den for the first time, oblivious of the dangers they're about to face in the world outside. The slope itself poses the first threat and the first challenge to be overcome. Every wolf born in the wild is a symbol of our improved ecological stewardship. But it's a frail new relationship, and both parties still have a lot to do if it is to prove viable for the future. We both need to learn more about each other before people can truly be said to be living with wolves.